Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar. We're going to begin the presentation in approximately 1 minute from now. All right, hello and welcome to Citrix Moves Data to Amazon Redshift Fast with Matillion ETL. My name is Ryan Peterson. I'm a Partner Solutions Architect for Amazon Web Services. I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's presentation. When you joined today's webinar, you selected to join by either phone call or your computer audio. If for any reason you would like to change your audio selection, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in the control panel. From the control panel, you'll also have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions panel. We'll collect the questions and address as many as we can during the Q&A section at the end of today's presentation. At the end of today's event is a brief survey. Please stay connected until the end of the broadcast and submit your feedback, as your opinions count and matter to our future presentations. Lastly, the PowerPoint presentation will be available through SlideShare along with the recording of the webinar on YouTube. Via an email, you will be sent 2 to 3 days after the conclusion of the event, so please keep an eye out for that and follow up with any emails sent to the address you've provided. In addition to learning about Amazon Web Services, we're also going to hear from Sean Edmondson, who's the Senior Director of Engineering at Citrix, from Shia Jem, the Lead Database Engineer for Citrix, and from Ed Thompson, the CTO for Matillion. Today, we're going to learn about how to move data to Amazon Redshift with speed and accuracy, how to make informed business-critical decisions by analyzing data with Amazon Redshift, how to speed time to value for your analytics initiatives using Matillion's push-down ELT architecture. And please remember to post your questions in the chat box throughout the event, and we'll get to those questions at the end. Let's begin with Amazon Web Services. So with Amazon Redshift, traditional analytics looked like this. You would take various source systems, whether it's OLTP, ERP, CRMs, and line of business applications, and you'd push them to a data warehouse, ultimately receive out business intelligence. It was on-premise, it was dealing with relational data, and you had terabytes, petabyte scale. It was usually a very large CapEx investment, and we believe what's happened now is we've changed the model of how you can go and do that. So for one, you can spin it up really rapidly and much easier with Redshift. You can get a simple click button start and get working on your warehouse within minutes. The time lag that it used to be to get to a point where you had a data warehouse in the first place is all gone. It's cost effective with no upfront costs. You just simply pay as you go, swipe your card, and keep building your data warehouse. It's extremely scalable. We talk about elastic scalability. You can also scale to various regions globally, so the ability to go out as far as you need to go. And without having to retain all of the personnel to maintain and manage the physical infrastructure related, we give you a better, faster, and more cost-effective way of handling your data warehouse. Let's say we're very integrated. There's a lot of different connectivity we have throughout Amazon and throughout other organizations' tooling. You'll hear about some of that today. And of course, very secure, audited at every step of the place. And we have quite a lot of compliancy features covering things like HIPAA compliancy and more. One of the more interesting things that we do is we talk about the data lake. All of the data that you have can be pushed up through files into S3, and using something called Amazon Spectrum or Redshift Spectrum, you can actually query that data from the file directly into Redshift. That is one feature that really enhances the capabilities of the platform, and with support for Parquet, ORC, Avro, and others. So very interesting opportunities when it comes to ingesting file content into your EDW. With that said, a lot of different organizations are utilizing Redshift. You can see some of them on the screen there. We see more and more are picking up Redshift every single day. And some of those organizations we'll talk about today, and specifically, I'd love to talk about Citrix and how Citrix has made the decision to use Redshift for ShareFile. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Sean Edmondson and Shia Jem. Sean, you want to go ahead and talk about ShareFile?
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. This is Sean Edmondson. I lead backend engineering for Citrix ShareFile, covering our cloud services, platform, storage, and databases. And we have a strong DevOps culture in ShareFile, and both Shia and I work really closely with our cloud ops team as well. Shia?
Hello, everyone. This is Shia Jem, lead database engineer here at Citrix. I bring technical expertise and leadership to the database team.
Cool. Thanks, Shia. So advancing. There we go. So from a business point of view, ShareFile is a rapidly growing Citrix product for content collaboration and file sharing. For enterprises as well as small business, ShareFile emphasizes security, user experience, and choice. For example, we can securely provide collaboration access across on-premise file servers, applications such as SharePoint, and of course our own cloud storage. Now from a technical point of view, ShareFile is essentially a rather large SaaS web application. We have roughly 4.5 million users and over 80,000 paid accounts with billions of managed files using over 19 petabytes of cloud storage last I checked. We run over 2 million monthly instance hours across many EC2 and Azure regions, which is the equivalent of about 3,000 full-time running instances. And we have a well-automated DevOps deployment. I'm really proud that we hit 3.5 nines or 99.95% uptime in 2017, despite the February outage in a certain cloud storage service that we depend on. Now let's dig down into our analytics problem. Oops, there we go. A couple of years ago, we changed the ShareFile platform to use a high-capacity internal message bus for end-user events. This hits over 500 events per second at peak times, and it delivers a ton of detail about user and programmatic activity. The bus serves many purposes, such as event-driven workflows, async customer integrations via ShareFile webhooks, and most recently, the Citrix Analytics service itself, which is a slick product that delivers unique analytics for security and other domains to our customers. And of course, the event stream is a rich source of information for our internal analytics, which is what we're talking about today. Brian, can you give me the desktop real quick? So I'm going to show an internal live dashboard to give you a sense of our event volume. Let's see, is this coming up? Okay. So anytime a user performs a core ShareFile operation anywhere on Earth, such as logging in, you see a dot on this map within 1 second of the actual event. So this dashboard is throwing away all the event detail except the IP geolocation, but every actual event has a ton of properties, which makes them a gold mine for analytics. So this is a real-time stream. It's at the core of the ShareFile platform, and the question is, how do we do analytics on this thing? So getting back to the slides. Let's see, there we go. All right, so what's our problem? Oops, I went too far again, sorry. We wanted to deliver high-value dashboards and reports on things like active use and customer lifecycle and geographic behavior patterns. And we wanted to base that data on the entire unaggregated event stream, running queries over billions of events. So essentially, we want to just slurp all those events into a giant database and do fast, interesting queries on it. We really wanted to have our cake and eat it too. And we also needed a very lean solution suitable for our SQL devs and our application devs. We couldn't justify going out and building a team of data scientists and a MapReduce cluster just to do this internal analytics. So that is the problem we're at. How do we do analytics on billions of events without a massive investment? And that's where Redshift and Matillion came in. So at this point, I'd like to hand it off to Shia, who's our senior technologist who personally built much of what we're about to talk about.
Hello again. Thanks, Sean. So in this part of the webinar, I would like to delve deeper into how Citrix has correlated data across multiple data sources to drive deeper insights into our data and build a stronger analytics platform. The eventing system that Sean just demoed and talked about has been pumping data into our Redshift databases. And some of our tables over there have upwards of 1 billion records. For instance, one of the main tables we have is the files table. And the files table has data coming from events around file operations, and this would be copy, move, deletes, shares, uploads, downloads. And another example would be the sessions table. And this is information around user logins, logouts, the IP that the session came from, all of that good information. And the data that we have from the system has been great. We've been able to drive a lot of analytics, metrics, and the metrics are both real-time because we're able to talk about a point in time that a particular event is happening, and we're also able to look at it over a period of time. However, as we started presenting these reports to our end users, we started being asked questions that clearly needed an extra dimension of data. For instance, while we could tell how often a user had logged in over the past quarter and what times, we didn't have the data to tell what the first name or the last name or where the user had logged in from. We could not put that data together. Now, we do have the data. It's just outside of Redshift. It's in our relational database systems, in our sales databases, in our reporting databases, and we had to find a way to bring this all into Redshift, correlate them, and then build analytics off of multiple data sources. So how do we go about doing this? As part of iteration 1, we decided to build a workflow to get the data in using SSIS. Now, the database systems that I just talked about rely heavily on SQL technologies, so SSIS was a natural choice for us. We had deep technical knowledge there, and we knew we could use the database team and myself, for the most part, to build this together. So the package that we first built aggregated data from our database system. Our database system is a multi-tenant, horizontally sharded system, which now has, I want to say, about 35 databases. So we had to aggregate the data from all of these databases, transform the data, write it out into CSV files, and then we built another process that would move the CSV files into S3 buckets, and then eventually the copy command from Redshift to upload them in. As you can tell, this is a fairly cumbersome process. Multiple moving pieces, which means higher maintenance costs. Also the fact that we needed our team to build this out. Now the database team is heavily involved in other tasks as well, so this increased our load. And we knew that this wasn't necessarily scalable, especially as each workflow took upwards of a few days, even up to a week to build, which meant that every time an analyst asked for a table to be brought in, that was a week of dedicated database engineer time. Lastly, the workflows ran on our ETL servers, which increased load on our SQL Server systems. So we knew we had to find a better way to build our workflows. So as we researched into products that are available, we came upon Matillion. Matillion was easy to procure from the AWS Marketplace, and we had it deployed and running in a couple of hours. The next step was to build a proof of concept to determine if Matillion was the right solution for us. Now, Matillion has out-of-the-box support to move data into Redshift. It provides for components that we are able to easily configure. And in fact, we found that using just one component out there, we could set our source database string, our connection string there, set the destination table that we wanted the data into, put together a really quick script, and this was a transformation script, and we had data loading into Redshift. So essentially, our proof of concept itself took a few hours. I want to say no more than a day to build out. So we knew we were on the right path here. I also found that as I configured the components that they were very intuitive. It's a visual interface. And while it's great to be able to have SQL skills to write out the scripts, a non-SQL user would be just as comfortable with Matillion to put together. In fact, we now have our marketing team and sales team using Matillion as well, and they very recently built out integrations with Marketo. So all in all, Matillion has been a great success for us. Matillion is also a ELT tool, which means all the transformations run on Redshift, which implies that our ETL servers no longer have to do the transformations on them. Troubleshooting is easy. The visual interface really helps us to zero in on issues pretty quickly. And we have started leveraging Matillion to build out our custom reports. We've been able to write out the workflows to the point where once we generate the report, we are able to upload it into a ShareFile folder for the user, and the user is then able to securely access that report. We've also built out SQS messages for error loading and error logging as well. So the results speak for themselves. With Matillion, we've been able to load millions of rows of data into Redshift in minutes. It's greatly increased our efficiency and agility, and we are now able to gather, collate, and analyze user data faster than ever before and at a much granular level. I'd like to quickly talk through a couple reports that we have here. The first one here is the account active use. Until we had the eventing system and our data coming in from our other data sources, we really defined active use to be when a user logged in, logged out, and they were done. But we've not since been able to widen that definition to talk about not just when a user logged in or logged out, but how they intentionally used our system. On the upper left corner here, you see data that's very relational and that came in straight from our relational source, and the rest of the slides have data coming in from multiple sources. The next slide here is partner usage, and again on the upper left corner, relational data. On the right, you can see that it's correlated data. It's partners by industry. So the events are coming from our event system, and the rest of the data is coming from our relational and some sales data as well there. The graphs below are all eventing data. This is one of my favorite slides. This particular dashboard was built as a request from our product management team. Our product management team was looking into visibility to see how a feature that was just released performed. Essentially, they wanted to know how the feature was being adopted and how it was used by users. And by having our eventing system bringing data in, as well as our relational system talking about the names of the tools and all of that information, we're able to show here how users have been logging into our system. The different color codes talk about the tools that they use to access our system. This has been great because we've been able to make our features more robust based on user demand. And we've also been able to look at features that could potentially be deprecated because they're not used as much as we thought they were being used. The last slide I have here is really numbers. Data transformed to date, we're looking at 1.2 billion. Data moved is 20 million. And honestly, this increases on a daily basis as we bring in more workflows. Our future plans involve moving all reporting to Redshift, and this would be all of our application reporting that we now have running on our application to integrate it with Redshift and then present it. And with that, I would like to hand this over to Ed Thompson, CTO of Matillion.
Thank you very much. So hello everybody, and yes, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction, and then we'll dive into a quick demo just to give everyone a little bit of a feel for Matillion. She has given a great introduction to the product and the success that Citrix had with the tool. I'm just going to kind of expand on that with the key sort of differentiators for Matillion. Well, Matillion is primarily an ELT tool. And all that essentially means is we push down all the transformation work that we do onto the underlying Redshift server. So Redshift, all Redshift Spectrum is doing the underlying transformation work, which means you get all the advantages of the scalability and price competitiveness of that platform to perform the kinds of transformations that you would build in any ETL tool. A lot of ETL tools now recognize this and will have ELT features, but Matillion is always built from the ground up as an ELT tool primarily. What that means is it's built specifically for the underlying platform. So Matillion's not a generalist tool built to allow you to do ETL on any database. It's built specifically for Redshift and Redshift Spectrum, and that means that we always follow the Redshift best practice. It's not up to the users to do that. And the ELT approach gives you fantastic speed because you're leveraging the underlying sort of horsepower of that cloud-based data warehouse. It also allows us to build great simplicity into the tool. Ultimately, the tool is built around SQL. So anyone that's sort of familiar with SQL is going to get on great with the tool. But also, if you're a relative SQL novice, Matillion will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Similarly, when it comes to getting data into your Redshift data warehouse, we have taken great strides in making that whole process as easy as possible. And finally, the scalability. Of course, the scalability is inherent in the scalability of Redshift. Redshift's an extremely scalable platform, and anybody wanting to build a small data warehouse right through to multiple terabytes, multiple petabytes, they can scale their Redshift platform appropriately, and also grow their Redshift as their data volume grows, and that's exactly what Citrix are doing. Matillion, as Shea mentioned, is available on the AWS Marketplace and we're the highest rated product on the AWS Marketplace. It delivers into your own AWS account as an AMI, so we're not a pure SaaS product or anything like that. And the lovely thing about that is it means that customers are always in control of where their data is going. It always lives inside their own Amazon infrastructure. We're not processing any data on customers' behalf. It's not a software as a service tool. 90% of our customers say they refer us to a friend, and I've just got one customer quote on there. If you want to see more great customer quotes, take a look at the reviews on our AWS Marketplace page. Because of the way AWS Marketplace works, you can essentially be up and running and starting to build ETL processes in 5 minutes. So let's jump over to a demo very quickly, and I'll just kind of show you the tool, give you a feel for the capabilities. I'll get a screen share going here. Okay, excellent. So you should be seeing my screen now. I'm sure someone will shout if they're not, and we'll take a quick look at the Matillion demo. So what you're looking at here is the Matillion ETL tool itself. Matillion's a browser-based ETL tool. So first of all, nothing to download and install onto your local desktop machine, anything like that. If you've got a team or a small team of ETL developers, data scientists, or as Shea said, people working with data and marketing, they can just point their web browser at the Matillion ETL instance and immediately be inside those ETL projects getting going. So this on the screen here is an example of a data transformation inside Matillion ETL. And this is kind of the bread and butter of the tool. This is what customers spend most of their time working with, building their data transformation logic, usually pulling together multiple data sources to create a single analytic ready data set. So here we have four data inputs, these orange squares, and then this data output, which is my analytic data output. If I right click and validate this job now, what we'll see is you'll see that the borders on those tiles going from gray to green. That's the push down validation of where we push down the validation onto the underlying Redshift server. This has lots of advantages when you're building ETL processes, and it's one of the things that makes the tool very easy to use because you can see your mistakes as you go along, because the validation that comes back from Redshift is very strict, which means that you encounter problems straight away rather than building out a big complex flow and then spending minutes, hours, days debugging that flow. And then the other thing that you can do in an ELT tool like Matillion is you can see what's going on at each and every stage of the ETL process. So here I've got like a starting data set here called flight, and that flight data set has got 123 million rows of data, and when we sample that we can see it looks like this. I then move on to the next step in the process. This is a filter. This is just filtering down our flight data set. And we filter that down to 28 million rows, and we can see we've got data from the year 2005 onwards. It's a year in there. Then we apply some more filters, and then here we've set up I've got my flights data, and I want to embellish that with another data set, which could have come from somewhere else. I'll describe how these data sets got into the product in a second. This is our planes data set. We can see it's got kind of plain information like the manufacturer and the model and the engine type and things like that. We then bring those two data sets together in a join. This join's configured here, bringing in the main table, joining it onto the planes table. Then we set up a join expression in this screen here. And this is just an example of, this is an SQL join expression, but of course what we've done here is built an editor to make it really easy to see, to build that join. So you can see I've got all of the fields that are available to build the join, and all of the functions that are available in Redshift, tailored specifically to Redshift to set up that join. And then if I then go and sample that data at that point, you can see how many rows I'm working with, still working with 23 million rows of data. And if we actually look at the data itself, scroll over to the right-hand side, we can see that I've successfully joined those tail number, the manufacturer, the model, etc., onto my original data set. So as an ETL developer, I know immediately that my join has connected, has worked, and I can move on to the next step in my ETL process. All of the components in Matillion are just set up with this kind of property-driven approach. So you just configure the components as you go. And in the end, this will process 123 million rows of data, embellishing and joining on these three data tables, and then performing some calculations. Here we join on we work out the delay ratio, and then we use that to set a flag to say if it's a long delay or a short delay. And we end up with an output data set that is ready for analysis. So you can point your favorite data analysis tool, be it something like QuickSight or Looker or Tableau, at the output data set in Redshift and start doing analytics straight away. So that's the transformation side of Matillion. This is a very simple example. These transformations can get much, much more complicated than this, much, much more sophisticated. But what I'll also like to show you is the orchestration side of the tool. And that's really the overall ETL process from start to finish, including how we get the data into Redshift in the first place, and then what we can do around that data processing that we've set up in the transformation. So let's take a quick look at that. So this is a transformation job in Matillion. And this kind of shows the whole ELT process quite nicely, because here we have a starting point, and this can kind of be read like a visual script, so you can see the process going along. After the starting point, we split out into 4 parallel flows, so that's 4 things happening at once here, and we create 4 separate tables. So I've got 4 tables being created there. And then we load some data. And this is deliberately kind of showing off some of the different ways that data is loaded. So first of all, we have data being loaded from RDS, which is the Amazon Relational Database Service that you can run a MySQL, a Postgres, or a SQL Server database on. We have a first-class connector, which will make it really easy just to pull data in, interrogate your AWS account, and pull back most of the connection details by itself. Just ask you for a username and password, and off you go. Here we pull some data from a REST API. Matillion has a REST API connector that will connect to just about any REST API. So if you've got internal REST APIs or external systems that we don't already support via REST API, it's really easy to pull that data in. Pulling some data from a spreadsheet, because everybody has some spreadsheets in their organization, whether they like them or not. So in this case, it's a Google Sheet. And then this is some data files that are in S3. So a lot of organizations will have data either already in S3 or landing in S3 by some other process. We want to make it really easy to ingest data. We've got quite a lot of tools to make that easy as possible. Once we've got data loaded in, we bring all that together here. All those 4 parallel flows are brought together in this AND component, and then we run our transformation. So that's kind of to create the tables, load the data, and then build all those transformations that we just saw with the airport data, the plane data, and the flights data. And then after that, we can move on to some other stages in the process. Quite a lot of the time we'll want to send out notifications. And I think Shia mentioned that she was sending some notifications out via SQS. That's a really popular way, just to drop a message onto an SQS queue to maybe initiate some other external process. We can send out SNS messages for email notifications or any other messaging system. Or we can integrate directly into CloudWatch, so you can push into CloudWatch messages, alerting, so you can see exactly how your ETL processes are running in CloudWatch. And then finally, if you want to then take the data that's been processed in Matillion on somewhere else, we can push that data back into RDS, for example, with an RDS bulk output, or we can push that data back out to S3. And that then might be picked up by some other system. Maybe you want to do some AI feed, an AI model, or do some data ingestion into a machine learning system. Whatever you need, good quality, prepped, analytic ready data for, Matillion can deliver that. Big thing inside, we have lots and lots of components, and Matillion always follows this sort of component-driven approach, which is common for ETL tools. But the big important connectors for the orchestration side of the tool are, of course, the data loading components. So I'm just going to open these real quick and zoom in on them a little bit. Hopefully you'll see some names of some systems that you recognize, but we have all sorts of CRM and marketing systems, Mixpanel, NetSuite, Marketo, Salesforce, obviously very popular. On-premise databases like Couchbase, Cassandra, Mongo. We've got integration to social networks, various ERP systems, spreadsheets, a whole load of internet services, things like Elasticsearch, Magento, very popular, YouTube as well. And then various financial systems, PayPal, Square, Stripe, etc. And then a whole lot of kind of more generic ones, like the database query, which will pull any on-premise relational database. You can pull in with the database query components. You've got things like SQL Server, DB2, MySQL, Oracle, etc. So by combining orchestrations and transformations, you can build out fully featured, fully functional ETL processes from end to end, which will populate data warehousing, whatever data transformation or data migration task you want to perform on top of Redshift, pushing down all that underlying processing onto the Redshift instance. And then the final sort of things that are in the tool that are really important, we have things like version control built in. Obviously, there's a scheduler built into the tool, an API for starting jobs, and then we've got sort of full user and permission management, whole loads of sort of a lot of the nice features that you want to build around your ETL tool, particularly in an enterprise organization, to allow different people, different levels of access, centralized control and administration of the ETL processes and the ETL pipelines, and also be able to version control them across multiple instances and have dev test and live and things like that. So it's a whole load more, which we can perhaps go into a little bit more detail at a later date. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor of Matillion ETL. And I think at that point, we'll go back to the slides, if that's all right. Lovely. So further information about Matillion, you can and Redshift, sorry, you can find here. I think I'm probably going to be handing back to AWS at this point, so I'll let somebody else take over.
Ed, Sean, she had really, really great information, a fantastic presentation. I thought it was really, really great. I have to say we've got a great group of participants this day and quite a lot of great questions. So I'd love to get to those right away. So hopefully you guys are all off mute. Let's see if we can get through as many as we can before we run out of time. Citrix first, what message bus did you use in your implementation?
It's RabbitMQ, managed with our own DevOps automation.
Perfect.
We use lots
nice
of SQS as well, but for this particular kind of bus, Rabbit works really well.
And then I think we answered this question already, but the question was, in what ways can you connect to an Oracle on-prem database? And I believe that was through the ODBC JDBC connector.
That sounds like a question for me. Yes, the Matillion uses a JDBC connector to connect to Oracle, and when Matillion ingests data into Redshift, it follows kind of the best practice route for doing that. So it will actually load that data into S3, and then it will do one of two things. In kind of normal mode, if you like, it will issue the copy command to load that data into Redshift, and that whole process is very, very fast. Both the loading to S3 and the data ingestion. You do also have the option, if you want to take advantage of Redshift Spectrum, of using what we call external mode, which is just a switch on the component. And that will actually leave the data in S3, but create an external table definition in Redshift so that you can query that data directly on S3 without ingesting it, without using your disk space inside your Redshift cluster if you want to.
Excellent. The next question that came was for Citrix. Could you give us any examples of the types of transformations you've built using this ELT process?
I can take that.
Perfect.
So the transformations are of two kinds that we've been building so far. The first set of transformations involve moving data from our data sources into Redshift tables. And once it's in Redshift, we have further cleansed it if need be. Mostly there hasn't been much of a need for that, but the transformation has certainly happened over there. And then we aggregate the data with eventing data. Usually it's some kind of a roll-up summary kind of thing that we build, and apply the data coming in from our OLTP database sources, almost like a relational dimension to our fact event tables, and use that to populate final tables. We then have Tableau sitting on top of this to visualize the data into the reports that we want to put out.
Perfect. How are you handling upserts into Redshift using Matillion?
At this time, we have not done upserts yet. Most of our data has been either direct inserts or delete and replace.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, I'll just expand on that a little bit, if I may. So Matillion as a tool gives you, we have a database update component that you can use at the end of transformation. That has two modes. That has an update mode, which does a DML bulk update, or you can run it in delete insert mode, which will, within a transaction, delete matching rows and then reinsert those rows for updates. So usually the latter of those two is the most performant, but it really depends on exactly what you want to do or what you expect to be doing with the data.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. A question for you, Ed, still. Are the transformations from Matillion batch, microbatch, real time? What kind of options do you have?
So Matillion is a batch-focused tool, but it's very much designed to work in a micro batch way, as well as a kind of a macro batch, if that's such a thing. So what I mean by that is a lot of customers will work on micro batches of data, either on a kind of a time basis, so every few seconds or a couple of minutes, or more often on kind of a data landing basis. So every time a data set lands in S3, that will, one of the ways that I didn't mention that you can initiate an ETL process in Matillion is via an SQS message. So you can set up Matillion with a couple of clicks to listen on an SQS queue and wait for a specific format message, and then it will kick off a process with some parameters at that point. That's the way to set up a micro batch. And you can do that every time a file lands on S3. It can fire an SQS message and initiate Matillion to just process that file. That's a very efficient way of doing micro batching in Matillion.
Yeah, that's excellent. There's a few questions in this space, so I'll kind of generalize them. The question is Matillion EC2 instances being used for all of the joins, all of the functions, or are you able to push any of the workloads down to places like Spectrum or Redshift direct processing?
Yeah, great question. So it's all being pushed down. Our mantra at Matillion is we're lazy and we don't want to do work. That's not a reflection on us. That's a reflection on the tool. It wants to push down the work that it does onto the underlying platforms that Amazon provides. Because Amazon's providing these fantastic scalable platforms. And it's not just Redshift, but Redshift very much sits at the core of the products. It's Spectrum, it's SQS, it's CloudWatch, it's S3, it's in the future we'll be looking very heavily at close to things like containers, Lambda functions. All of these are very reliable and scale very well for the user. So we will use those. So wherever possible, we don't do any work on the Matillion instance. In a normal customer scenario, the Matillion instance should be basically idle. It's just acting as an orchestrator and a coordinator of the best-of-breed AWS services.
Great questions. Can you talk about HIPAA compliance and how Matillion can help deal with PHI and PII data, especially given the recent GDPR announcements?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So HIPAA compliance is a work in progress for us. Because we're not a SaaS service, that puts us in a strong position, because the product is kind of almost a piece of software that's delivered into your Amazon VPC and is controlled by you. However, right now, the product isn't HIPAA compliant in its own right yet. We're working on that.
Okay. Got a question. Somebody has an IBM AIX, wants to know if they can connect to the Oracle databases in IBM AIX and migrate data in the AWS. What's the best process to use for bringing that data in as near real time as possible?
Yeah. So for Oracle on AIX, my understanding is, and there may be some caveats. I'm not an AIX expert, so my understanding is that you'll be able to access that data via JDBC, and the best way to deal with that right now in kind of would be in like a micro batch scenario. If you've got things like reliable updated dates on the major tables that you want to pull in, Matillion will be releasing over the course of the summer a CDC version of the product that will work with Oracle on all platforms, that will essentially turn those data will turn the data changes into streams that will then micro batch and process as streaming data. Yeah, right now you can just query that Oracle data directly to pull into batch processes in Matillion.
All right, perfect. There's a question about CDC from source databases, so it sounds like that's coming soon. Question here is S3 always the staging layer for any workflow built in Matillion? I think basically the gist of the question.
Yes, it is. I guess I'm trying to read between the lines because I'm interested in the reason for the question. But yes, it is. We always stage that data via S3. Don't forget that, and there's full first-class support in this for the tool, that data can, of course, be encrypted using the KMS encryption system in AWS if you're worried about the sort of sensitivity of the data. What we don't ever do is kind of do like DML inserts into Redshift. That's kind of not what it's designed to do, really. So yeah, we always bulk ingest via S3.
So the follow-up question to that is how you handle spacing or planning for storage space on S3 for those workflows. So with S3, an S3 bucket is, as far as I'm aware, effectively kind of infinite. There are some good sort of best practices and rules around how you insert data into S3 and how you kind of structure that storage, particularly if you want to use Spectrum and you want to use partitioning in Spectrum. That's a great way of, if you've got sort of daily, hourly data sets, you can structure them with like a month, with like a date-based directory structure, and then partition the data like that, and that can make some very efficient uses of Redshift Spectrum. But yeah, in terms of quantity, there's best practices around in the best way to split data up according to the size of your Redshift cluster for the maximum ingestion speed, particularly with large data sets. That's really important. In terms of kind of worrying about the size of those data sets, as far as I'm aware, our customers don't really. There's a question here about migrating ELT jobs from dev to test to prod environments, and can that be scheduled using a third-party scheduling tool?
Yes, it can. So Matillion has a an API which covers the full product, and we've got some basic scripts which customers can take and kind of run with, and they tend to sort of adjust them to their own ends, really. Or you can just do it yourself. But you can pull either whole projects out or individual jobs out, check them into a central source control management system, and then if you've got a build system, you can use that to push into a pre-prod live environment, however you want to do it. But yeah, all of that very much possible. All of the assets that Matillion creates are available through the API just on documents. They're quite easy to work with.
Great answers. Thanks, Ed, for all these these are great questions, great answers. Is there any transformation plugin available for converting XML messages to a flat structure?
Yeah, there is. So there's a few little caveats to it. So the best way to do that currently is with our API query component, which is designed to work with structured JSON and XML documents. And those will, work up to various levels of nesting in order to pull and extract the right kinds of features that you want out of that. We'll be doing more. We'll be doing more around that because we'd like to take advantage of some of the features of the Glue platform in AWS to do some pre-processing of that kind of structured data. So one of the things that Glue can do is relationalize semi-structured data like JSON or XML into essentially a series of relational tables that you can work with really easily in a tool like Matillion.
Great questions. I think I'll make this one the last one because it's a good one to end on. What's the cost structure? How do you kind of get started using Matillion?
Yeah, so Matillion is, we very much took the Amazon model of cloud economics. So Matillion, you pay for by the hour, just like AWS, or so it's on EC2, I should say. That's about a minute now, isn't it? But yeah, Amazon, Matillion starts at $1.37 an hour for kind of for our sort of what we describe as a medium instance type. You pay for the hour while the instance is running, which means if you're developing ETLs, you need it running, and if you're running ETLs, you need it running, but you can turn it off the rest of the time. So we have plenty of customers who don't run Matillion 24/7 if they have, overnight batch jobs and things like that. That's a perfectly reasonable use case. So yeah.
Thanks, Ed. So I want to thank one more time Sean, Shia, and Ed for all the great information they provided on the call. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. We know you have other things that you're doing, and so taking time out of your day to join us is fantastic. Please remember to stay connected and complete a brief survey at the end of this webinar. Look forward to supporting you and your current and future endeavors. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.